Let's talk a little bit about sanctuary neighborhoods. Jim Ryan, ABC News from Dallas, Texas, joins us. Jim, good morning to you. Hello.
Including in St. Louis, there's been talk of a formal sanctuary city declaration. I know that's one a topic of conversation there, as it is in communities all across the country. Those communities, of course, as you know, Doug, face the potential loss of state or federal funds if they make that move, if they're not as cooperative with ICE agents as the federal government would like them to be. But now there are these neighborhood groups that are kind of popping up and either offering formal help to undocumented immigrants or documented immigrants for that matter, or sort of informal support to those communities.
What's interesting, Jim, is that here in St. Louis, we already talk about immigrants, but now the Board of Aldermen voted 17-10 to add abortion and contraceptive use to existing non-discrimination laws. So I guess we're not alone in this effort, but this whole sanctuary city thing seems to have really grown legs over the past couple of years.
Well, yeah, it has, and I think that especially given the Trump administration's tough stance on immigration, and you know, as much as rumor as anything else, I suppose, the talk of mass deportations of people, there's been kind of an uptick. But remember that President Obama, there were more deportations of undocumented immigrants under the Obama administration than either the George W. Bush or the Bill Clinton administration. So we have yet to see what the numbers will actually show in terms of the immigration policy, but Trump certainly made that part of his campaign last year.
So what's the bottom line on all of this, especially when the legal system starts getting involved? What have the courts ruled so far, bearing in mind that this is probably going to keep percolating along, and I could actually foresee this going to the Supreme Court ultimately?
Oh, I think you're right, especially if you have entities as large as state governments that are, fighting this with their municipalities. Here in Dallas, a good example, Dallas County has declared itself a welcoming community, not a sanctuary community, but a welcoming community. The state government is threatening to withhold state funds. The legislature is talking about that right now. So I think you're right, Doug, that a Supreme Court battle is being set up in this community and others around the country.
I'm just interested as to when the organizations that are not in favor of so-called sanctuary cities, what is their complaint and where do the issues lie there?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the fear of loss of federal funds. I mean, highways are collapsing and bridges need repair all over the country. A lot of that work is done with federal money. So within communities, I think there is some concern that if this formal stance is taken and if local police departments or sheriff's offices aren't supporting or cooperating so much with ICE agents, then they could lose those federal dollars. There's real concern about that in some places, bigger communities, Los Angeles, that'd be millions and millions of dollars.
Are there a lot of sanctuary cities in the country, or is it just here, there, and everywhere?
Well, I mean, you have to define the term. If it's a formal declaration by a city council or a policy laid out by a police chief, there are several dozen of those places, and they kind of dot the map coast to coast. I think if you're talking about a sanctuary neighborhood, they could be all over the place. And again, they offer either formal support or kind of informal support to their immigrant neighbors.
Makes you wonder if the neighborhoods would be less visible on the radar screen than would, say, an entire... Yeah, so they could probably fly under the radar for an extended period of time before somebody figures out what they're doing and maybe files a protest against them.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what would the protests look like if neighbors are posting signs in support of immigrants? I mean, you're talking about the First Amendment. I talk about a Supreme Court case. I think that would be first in line. But those organizations don't generally accept public funds anyway from either a state or a federal office, so they're kind of immune from that. They can say essentially what they want.
I'm intrigued. I can see, based on what you've told us so far this morning, Jim Ryan of ABC, that I can see where cities, municipalities, and even states would be, in some cases, against this because of the threat of losing money from the federal government. Yet, in the information I have in front of me, it says some immigrants are actually pushing back against sanctuary neighborhoods and the concept. Why is that?
Well, sure. I mean, and there are a lot of immigrants who are here, have gone through the process legally, and they fully support the Trump administration stance on immigration, and they don't want to see sanctuary cities around them. There are pockets of conservative Hispanics here in Texas those folks say that they've been through the process. They did so legally and are working members of society. And they're concerned now about people who are still coming in illegally. So I think in those places you're going to see a sort of a backlash against this sanctuary city or sanctuary neighborhood process.
Let's use your city, Dallas, Texas, as an example here. Where is that standing legally right now as far as sanctuary city and those who are in favor and against it? Where is it going right now?
Well, it's kind of on hold right now, and part of that I think is this definition of terms. The county government has declared itself a welcoming community, not sanctuary community. And I'm not so sure that even the state government has come up with a definition for sanctuary community or sanctuary city. But there is this threat that coming from the governor's office and the legislature, which is very conservative and likely to pass something like this, that state funds to Dallas County could be curtailed or cut off completely. But I think the county may come back and say, well, we're not a sanctuary community. We're a welcoming community. So, I think this definition of terms, it's not an accident that they don't call themselves a sanctuary community.
There are no real laws on the books on this, are there?
Not really, no. And again, I think, and especially if you're talking about a neighborhood where people get together and put signs out or hold little symposiums and seminars, bring in an attorney to talk with immigrants about their rights, there's no way that you can sort of regulate that. I think those are people expressing their First Amendment right. If you start talking about a county government or a city government, things might get sticky.
Interesting to see that this is another one of those examples where there's no real solid footing when it comes to the law, and that means you're going to have to wait and see how different municipalities handle it, especially when the state or some other organization goes after them and sues them and takes them to court. And then ultimately, and who knows how long it could take, how long will it percolate up to the Supreme Court? Because I tend to agree with you. I think it's going to go to the Supreme Court for an ultimate decision on this.
I wouldn't doubt it. It may be a long time before that happens, but I suspect that it's coming.
All right, very good. Jim, thank you so much for the time today. Good hearing from you.
All right, thanks, Doug.
Jim Ryan, ABC News correspondent from Dallas, Texas, joining us this morning here on the Big 550 KTRS. It is a problem. There's just our neighborhood, we have a sign, a neighborhood watch sign up. And it's basically saying, you come into our neighborhood and you're acting shady, we're going to call 911. We're going to call the police and have them come by and check you out. Same type thing, I guess, except that the small communities. I think Jim's got a very good point. That if you're in a neighborhood and you say we want to be a welcoming neighborhood, or a neighborhood that thinks that immigrants should not be bullied or pushed around, yet at the same time, I could see others in neighborhoods saying, "Wait a minute, we don't need to do this. We're a nation of laws and people, and therefore, if these individuals are here legally, they should have nothing to fear. But if they are not in this country legally, well, that's another story entirely." But again, and I think this is the biggest underlying issue here that Jim and I were touching on, and that is, this is another classic example of how the law has not yet caught up to what's really going on in the world. The legal system doesn't have a system of checks and balances that have been put into place for this whole business of sanctuary neighborhoods. So as we say, to be continued, 9:19 right now here on the Big 550 KTRS.